Welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hi everyone, welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist Podcast, the show where great dentistry meets great business. It's Jesse Green here at the control panels as always, and today I'm delighted to be talking to you because we are talking all about managing risk in uncertain times. As I'm recording this, the COVID-19 pandemic is well underway. Around the world there's places that are in lockdown. Australia's not in lockdown as I record this, but of course, the situation remains fluid and things are evolving and changing rapidly. So in this particular program today, I wanted to share some thoughts around risk, where it sits in the value of a business, how to identify risk and what to do about risk. And the reason I want to talk about that today is throughout this COVID-19 situation, the businesses that manage risk the best, the ones that can identify risk and mitigate risk, are going to be the ones that have the greatest chance of survival. Now, that doesn't limit itself to dental practices, of course. That's generally across the board for businesses everywhere. But specifically with dental practices, we want to talk about a couple of the things you can do right now to put your business in the best possible position to come out of this situation stronger than you went into it. So when we start talking about risk, I want to begin the conversation by talking about business value, which might seem a little bit unusual to be thinking about that at a time like this, but it is an important thing to understand because the value of a business is determined using the basic formula where value is equal to the repeatable and sustainable earnings times a multiple. The repeatable and sustainable earnings, of course, are represented by cash flow or EBITDA, and the multiple, though, is sometimes referred to as a bit of a dark art, a bit of magic. But of course, the multiple is determined by the degree of the growth that the business has enjoyed and is anticipated to enjoy in the future, as well as any risks facing the business. So risk has an incredible role to play in the valuation of a business. So when it comes to managing risk, it's important to understand that it has always been an integral part of running a business. And for many businesses, as I mentioned, the ability to manage risk effectively during this COVID-19 pandemic could well be the difference between getting through it or not. Now, the reason in our work is that we focus so heavily on this during certain workshops that we run is because it's really easy to overlook managing risk and identifying risk because of the day-to-day busyness of running the practice. So the basic premise of any risk analysis is to ask yourself, what could disrupt my future stream of earnings? And of course, there are a heap of questions that you could ask that lead to that analysis or lead you to that question as well. And again, one of those questions might be, if I was a competitor, what would I do to disrupt me? Where am I vulnerable? Where am I overly reliant on one person? All those sorts of things. So again, all of these things can lead to the overarching question, which is, what could disrupt my future stream of earnings? So it's important to understand that as you go through this risk analysis process, there are some things that you have direct control over, and there are some things that you have no control over. So when it comes to the things that you do have control over, one of the first ones is around concentration or single point of failure. And, these types of risk, manifest as over-reliance on one type of thing. So it could be one customer group. And a typical example of that in dentistry could be being overly reliant on preferred provider schemes for patient flow. I'm not knocking preferred provider schemes. I'm just saying that if you are part of those schemes, you need to make sure that you're developing other channels to market outside of that. It could also mean that you're overly reliant on one supplier. And so in the lead up to this COVID-19 outbreak, we've seen challenges around supply of masks, and we've seen challenges of supply of hand sanitizer and other bits and pieces as well. So again, we need to make sure that we're not overly reliant on one type of supplier. Equally, we can be overly reliant on particular products in our business, and that could be a single point of failure. So for instance, if there was only one manufacturer of the autoclave testing protocols, and that particular business suffered, then that would have an impact for us as well because we couldn't validate our autoclaves. Equally, we can have over-reliance on key people in the business. meaning that if that person were to leave the business, it would have a significant impact on our ability to operate well into the future. So that's the first type of risk that we have control over, and it's concentration or single point of failure. The second type of risk that we do have control over is around predictability and sustainability. So what I'm really referring to here is cash flow in particular. So again, I'm reminded of the fact that years and years and years ago, I went to study at the University of Sydney to do a stock valuing course. It was a short course, and it was run by a professor of mathematics. And this particular professor was a real devotee of Warren Buffett, and he had studied Buffett up and down and all over, and he'd been able to put in place a couple of mathematical things that allowed him to choose stocks with pretty good accuracy in the terms of value investing. So one of the metrics that he spoke about that Buffett is really big on and takes into account when choosing companies to invest in is the stability of earnings growth. And he made the reference that businesses that have stable cash flow and where that cash flow is predictable, those sorts of businesses are more valuable than other businesses where the cash flow is up and down and it's going on the roller coaster ride. So in dental practice, it's exactly the same. We need to ensure stability of cash flow. And if you think about it like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, businesses have a hierarchy of needs too. And the very first need of any business is cash flow, because without it, businesses go broke. The lack of cash flow is what kills a business, period. So what we need to be able to do is to implement a blueprint or a structure that allows for the repeatable and sustainable production of cash through the business. So in the world that I live in, the model that we've developed for our clients is called the money machine, and it's a blueprint that if you follow it step by step, it will produce cash flow for you. It will absolutely produce cash in the quantums that you desire, provided that you work it. So the money machine begins with understanding where you want to end up economically and then reverse engineering. So it does require some financial forecasting. It does require the analysis of those numbers to be able to determine what's going to need to occur within the appointment book. And then, of course, it becomes an exercise in marketing and an exercise in case presentation or sales to fill the appointment book appropriately. So if you want to find more out about the money machine, head across to Savvy Dentist Academy and you can read a bit about it there. But of course, we need to make sure that the income from the practice or the cash flow from the practice is stable. And certainly during times of uncertainty, if we can make sure that we're earning well consistently, that's going to be able to give you peace of mind. It's going to give you a platform from which you can make decisions. And it's going to give your staff peace of mind as well, your team peace of mind, so that they feel secure in their role. So during this period where we're not sure whether there's going to be a shutdown or not, I think it's important for all the businesses there, while you're able to operate, to be able to be effective in generating cash flow, to make sure that you're doing all those things really well. So when it comes to risks that you can control or have direct control over, the third one I want to talk about is risks identified on the balance sheet. And so these would relate to the degree of leverage or debt you have in the business, as well as the operating cash on hand. So again, prudent management of debt levels is clearly good practice. And it's always good to have cash reserves for emergencies. So what that looks like in our world is we want to make sure that practice owners have what we call a rainy day bank account, which allows for you to squirrel some money away so that during times of crisis, that money will keep you afloat. For us, typically, it's good to have about 3 months worth of expenses, 3 to 6 months worth of expenses on hand. Now, whether you keep that in a bank account or some other access or some other structure that you can access it is really up to you. But whether it's in the bank account or otherwise, you might also want to have access to additional funds, such as redraw facilities, to bolster that rainy day account if you need to. So when it comes to balance sheets, managing the balance sheet really involves prudent management of inventory. And of course, it's about getting just the right amount of inventory, and that's a balancing act. You want to have enough stock on hand to be able to account for contingencies. So clearly masks and so on at the moment are one of those items we're all trying to source. But it's also important to not tie up too much cash needlessly so it sits on shelves. The other thing around balance sheet risk, of course, is capacity management, and we need to make sure that that's considered in detail as well. So surplus capacity, represents a lazy balance sheet, whereas a lack of capacity hampers growth. So again, we need to be able to manage these. And finally, in terms of things that you can control, it's about decision-making and assumptions that underpin or influence decision-making. And of course, we all have blind spots. Every single one of us does. And we all make assumptions because we're looking at things through a value system, through past experiences, and that influences the decisions that we make. So it's important, and indeed, I would say vital, to have some external perspective before you make decisions, to challenge any assumptions, to be asking yourself, what don't I see? And most business owners across the economy, not just dental practices, will look for confirmation of what they already know rather than challenging their thinking. And of course, what we already know gets us to what we've already got. And if we're changing circumstances, or the circumstances around us are evolving rapidly, we need to make sure that the assumptions that we've made thus far are actually valid and are suitable moving into the future. So it's really good to have an external set of eyes on that challenge for you, and to be able to have a sounding board to challenge your thinking and to ask you to think about more than just what you already know. So again, if you think about Tiger Woods, when he was at the height of his fame, when he was winning every major under the sun, he had about 5 coaches. And when he was asked why, he replied that he couldn't see himself swing. And so it's important to understand that we can't see ourselves swing either. We're not really aware of the challenges that we're overcoming with assumptions necessarily. We're not necessarily sure that we're holding those assumptions up to the light to see if they serve us or not. And so, again, it's important to remember, certainly in my experience, that every single one of my bad ideas started out as a good idea. And they became bad ideas because I didn't challenge my assumptions enough. And in hindsight, if I had done that better, I could have avoided a whole lot of pain. So, again, I think it's just important to remember that. Now, equally, when it comes to decision making, my experience is that when emotions are running high, intelligence is low, and our decision-making ability tends to be impacted adversely. So during the times of COVID-19, there will be emotional highs in terms of, the emotions will run high, and that's going to impact the ability of some business owners to be able to think clearly, to make good judgments. And again, it's really important to make sure that you don't make major decisions without just getting some external eyes on that. And you've probably got a trusted friend or mentor or someone to be able to talk to around that. And I would really encourage you to really stick close to them if that's the case. But don't make knee-jerk decisions. Don't make major decisions without getting an external set of eyes on that. And I think that'll just keep you safe, because when we're feeling emotional, we are all prone to making decisions that we look back on and regret. And I think that's just a human trait. It's not any particular failing. It's just part of the human condition. So from there, if we look at areas of risk over which you do not have control, there's things such as, general economic factors. It's what's happening with the stock market at the moment is beyond our control. What's happening with global factors, whether China and America are still going for a trade war, we can't control that. We can't really control interest rates and tax laws, but we can work with advisors to mitigate some of those risks, to make sure we're informed about the laws and the operating environment. And we must be, always trying to make sure we surround ourselves with the best possible minds to help us understand what we can do in amongst all that. We can't change the circumstances, but we can change the way that we respond to that. And again, with all of those economic factors, my underlying guidance to you is to make sure you focus your business around producing cash flow. And that, again, comes back to that money machine blueprint. So second type of risk over which you don't have control really comes back to industry-specific factors and market cycles. So again, we can't influence the number of dentists being trained. We can't influence the activities of the preferred provider networks or the health insurance companies or any of that sort of stuff. We can't influence any of that. But we need to be mindful of how we position ourselves in the market, and we work to create a category of one for ourselves and obviously keep our business insulated as best we can. From the regulatory environment, this is the third category of things that we don't have control over. Of course, when laws are being proposed, there's the opportunity to lobby and to have representation to influence that outcome. But of course, once the decision's been made, we just need to get on with it. So again, I think it's just about adapting and being nimble and being able to see the opportunities where they lie and to not get too focused on the negativity of it all. The fourth thing around risk is competitors, and I don't want to labor that too much, especially in this particular environment, but I do believe that as a whole, too many dentists spend too much time thinking about competition, and I think it's just better to use that energy to focus on our own race as well. So we've covered a few types of risk, risks that you can control, risks that you can't control so much, but in all of this, there's a lot of things that you can do to put your practice in the best possible position to get through any challenging times. So when it comes to risk mitigation strategies, what we're really trying to do is achieve one or more of these three things. And the first thing we like to achieve is our levels of control. We want to increase our level of control over the situation. So that's the first thing we're looking to try and do in a risk mitigation strategy. The second thing we're trying to do is to decrease the likelihood of an adverse outcome. What can we do to make sure that the risk of this event occurring are reduced? And then finally, we want to decrease the cost or the impact of an adverse outcome should it occur. So we're trying to, say basically, if this bad thing does occur, it's not going to hurt us as much as it would otherwise have because we've got these other mitigation strategies in place. So as we go through this COVID-19 situation and you're looking at the risks in your business and asking yourself, what don't I see? What assumptions am I making? What are the things that could disrupt my future stream of earnings? I'm going to be asking you to identify all of those things that could disrupt those future streams of earnings, to examine the assumptions that you're making, to make sure that you're getting an external set of eyes over any decisions that you make. And then as you plan out your mitigation strategies, just think about how you can increase the degree of control over the situation for yourself. How could you reduce the likelihood of an adverse outcome? And finally, how could you decrease the cost of it should it occur? So again, I think during this particular period of time, these skills are going to be really important to hone and to develop. And I've already indicated that it's an important part of general business anyway. But during this particular period of time, I think these skills are going to be really, really valuable. So I hope this gives you something to think about. I hope it gives you a framework to work within. And I know that for each of you out there, you're all working very hard to make sure your practice, does as well as it can. And of course, if there's anything that we can do to help, please join us in the Savvy Dentist Facebook group. It's a group there for practice owners. Would be more than happy to help you. If you've got questions, we'll do our best to answer them for you. It's free, of course. So come and join us there, and we look forward to serving you. In the meantime, take good care. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week for the next episode of the Savvy Dentist podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.